Shocking. Ross Coulthart and the dangerous truth about the 2015 DNA download. We killed them. That's what the source told Ross Coulthart. Not we found them. Not we recovered them. We killed them. And the bodies weren't wrapped in flight suits. They were wrapped in living skin that wasn't ours. You know what's crazy? That skin didn't die. It learned. It sealed. And then, in 2015, something hit our networks like a silent knife. No brute force, no beacon, just a file that shouldn't exist, showing up where nothing can get in. Here's the thing. Everyone calls it the DNA download. Most people think hack. People like us know better. A contractor said, "It wasn't a hack, it was delivered." Delivered as code, built as tissue. Software that becomes skin. The kind that maps threats, reroutes energy, prints cells on impact. And if that sounds like sci-fi, wait till you see the procurement trail we dug up. 3 black programs tied by a vendor they all swore they didn't share. The stakes? If biology is programmable, borders don't hold. Radar's a joke. Heat signatures lie. And Ross keeps hinting at a clock, 2026. Agencies are ditching normal procurement, dumping cash into biodefense, EM shielding, and cognition labs like the bills do next quarter. Meanwhile, there's one link, one file path, that ties crash retrieval, the living skin tests, and a facility that's supposed to be air-gapped. Trust me, this isn't lights in the sky. This is bodies, code, and a network that might be alive. We killed them. We taught it. And 2015 was the message back. So let's rewind to where the rumor started, and why it vanished overnight. The first whisper landed like they always do, late-night posts on a forum 2 clicks off mainstream, the kind where usernames look like random license plates. Someone said a packet appeared at a military-adjacent bioinformatics lab in early 2015. No ingress trail, no external IP. It compiled, then built. Not data. Tissue. The thread lasted 6 hours. Then accounts started deleting themselves. You know what's crazy? The rumor didn't spread because it sounded nuts. It spread because 2 separate handles, never friendly, always arguing, both claimed they'd seen the internal memo. Same phrasing, non-terrestrial metagenome. That's not UFO fan fiction. That's how a government lawyer hides an elephant under a tarp. Meanwhile, Ross Coulthart's reporting starts shaping the edges. He's talking retrieved craft, non-human biologics, and that one line, "We killed them." It echoed. If you've ever sat with crash retrieval veterans from the 194s and 190 SAXS, you know their language. They don't say aliens. They say pilots, occupants, biologics. Cold words to keep hands from shaking. Ross isn't tossing spice. He's reflecting what people under oath whisper. First breadcrumb from our side came from a contractor who hated the word hack. It wasn't a hack, he said. It was delivered. He used delivered like a doorbell rang. Then he shut up like someone took the batteries out. Paid silence has a tone. You learn it. And those living skin whispers? They weren't about little gray suits. We're talking panels that flex like muscle, plates that color shift without pigment, composite layers that drink heat and spit nothing. Self-healing, yeah, but that wasn't the jaw drop. The jaw drop was behavior. Threat mapping. Rerouting. Printing cells where stress was highest. Like a body that reads a battlefield the way your eye reads a room. Inciting incident hit in a lab that everyone swears is air-gapped. A team flagged an active sequence. Their term, not mine. Inside a sandbox that shouldn't hold anything live. Quarantine triggered. Not a digital firewall, a human one. Doors, badges, med scans. One tech allegedly broke out in a rash that looked metallic under dermal light. Labs don't panic unless a lawyer's already awake. That day lawyers jogged. Here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. If biology's programmable like code, your border isn't the coastline. It's your skin. It's your heat signature. It's your idea of what's in and out. Airspace defense counts on physics being predictable. This skin tech bends those assumptions. You think you're seeing a shape on radar. You're seeing a suggestion it lets you see. Then silence. Thread's gone. Accounts nuked. But procurement never lies. You can bury a username. You can't bury an invoice spike. In Q3 2015, 3 labs, 2 public-facing, one with a name you only see if your clearance prints in blue ink, show a synchronized surge in bioinformatics tooling. Not general upgrades. Metagenome alignment suites. Cloud instances spun up where none were budgeted. And a weird line item for autoclave enclosures, behavioral. Behavioral? Since when does an autoclave have behavior? We pulled contract euphemisms that wouldn't pass in daylight. Adaptive agent substrates, sensor skin denial, non-Newtonian threat wraps. It reads like inside baseball because it is. When engineers can't say skin, they say substrate. When they can't say communication, they say coupling. Meanwhile, people inside start booking fewer flights. Polygraph sessions tick up. You can see it in the HR footprints. Overtime spikes in security, not science. A technician I won't name said the quiet part. It arrived as code, built as tissue. He said the compile window was the same length twice, like a handshake the system expected back. That line haunted me. Code to tissue. Software to skin. You don't need a captive lab animal if the lab bench is the animal. Field rumor, because there's always a field rumor. A retrieval in the southwest where the wreckage bled black, then sealed like it never broke. Black like burned oil, but not hot. A crash site that repaired itself when the team backed off heat tools. That details repeated across 3 separate accounts years apart. Is it perfect? No, but matched weirdness is still a pattern. And then the meta picture. DARPA's engineered living materials program ramps around that time frame. Concrete that heals, polymers that respond. Cool, but there's still a gap. The capability we're hearing about sits beyond the stack. Heat shedding that ignores conduction loss, color shift with no power draw, EM absorption tuned on the fly. That's not a lab demo. That's a field doctrine. So where did the rumor start? In a place that looks like noise until you notice what vanishes. A file posted to a pastebin clone with a checksum that matches a closed network build system. That shouldn't be possible. Closed networks don't bleed checksums. Unless something wants parity between worlds, inside and outside, so it can finish a handshake. Why did it disappear? Because the first team that touched active material didn't treat it like a message. They treated it like a bomb. Lockdown, negative pressure, incineration protocols. You can hear the line forming. We killed them. Did we kill beings? Or did we kill nodes in something bigger? I don't know yet, but the language fits a network, not a tribe. The stakes clicked for me the day I saw a travel ban memo for key personnel right after a polygraph cycle. Not because of what it said, but what it kept out. No destination named, only exposure risk. Exposure to what? The material or the idea carried in it. And behind all that, a buried procurement trail nudged us. 3 labs, 1 vendor, a certification that didn't exist in 2014 suddenly mandatory by mid-2016. Level 4 BioSeal. Not for pathogens, for unknowns with adaptive behavior. Follow that vendor, and you don't just find labs. You find crash retrieval budgets, rapid response teams, and a quiet line in a legal packet. Indemnity for novel organism incidents. So yeah, the rumor spread, then it vanished. But money leaves footprints, and fear leaves language. Both are pointing to the same place. If 2015 wasn't a hack, it was a delivery. If it was a delivery, someone knocked. And if someone knocked and we slammed the door, then we killed them, isn't history. It's the first mistake. Now watch who cleaned it up, and why they're racing a clock. The file that shouldn't exist. Follow the footprints that don't want to be footsteps. FOIA comes back with the usual gray soup, pages that look like snowstorms, no responsive records, and the classic shuffle. Consult another agency. But metadata doesn't salute. Invoice metadata across 3 facilities lights up like a synced heartbeat in 2015. Same quarter, same vendors, same sudden orders for bioinformatics capacity that didn't match any published projects. You know what's crazy? None of the labs listed public grants that year for metagenomics. Yet procurement shows rush buys, alignment suites, custom FPGA boards for pattern parsing, and cloud instances spun from accounts that were supposed to be air-gapped. One purchase order even cites cold storage ingress hygiene. That phrase shouldn't exist. If you've got ingress, you're not cold. Here's the thing, buried in a red team internal review, someone used the phrase non-terrestrial metagenome. Not in a headline, in a footnote tied to a risk matrix. That's lawyer camouflage. You only write like that when you expect discovery, which means they knew it could blow back. Then we see the cloud log anomaly. An air-gapped center reports an ingress packet on a closed loop. The official line says, artifact of logging duplication. But a mirrored checksum lands in a public cloud the same hour. That's not duplication. That's someone or something asking for parity. Inside and outside showing the same fingerprint, so the build can continue. An insider puts it in one sentence. It arrived as code, built as tissue. He sketches it like a pipeline. compressed sequence, checksum handshake, staged compile in a virtual box they swear had no network path. Output wasn't a file. It was a scaffold, a gel that wasn't inert. They ran a stain, it responded. That shouldn't happen unless the code is more than sequence. Unless it carries behavior. Now match the pattern to DARPA's timeline. Engineered living materials starts to scale pilots around 2014 to 2016. Self-healing concrete, responsive polymers, microbial biofilms that do work. Cool, but the beats don't line up with what the labs bought. They bought tools for denoising long-read assemblies at ridiculous speeds, plus EM shielding for rooms that already had EM shielding. Why double shield a bench unless your sample talkbacks? The mini reveal hides in something boring, facilities upgrades. 2 labs list standard clean room retrofits. The third pays for a level 4 BioSeal in 2016, mid-year, through a vendor who usually outfits rapid response biocontainment for field teams. Not viruses, unknowns. The invoice memo uses a phrase I'd never seen. Behavioral quarantine envelope. Quarantine for behavior, not pathogen load. Follow that vendor. Their client list overlaps crash retrieval support contracts and a line of sensor denial upgrades you'd normally see on electronic warfare ranges, not bio suites. Same company installs skin sensor simulants for training. Read that again, skin sensor simulants. The lexicon keeps leaking. Engineers can't help themselves. Meanwhile, FOIA stonewalls get weirdly specific. One reply says, records, if they exist, would be classified under SAP designators not administered by this office. That's code for, you're knocking on the wrong door on purpose. And yet, invoices sit on public procurement mirrors for days before someone cleans them. Screenshots keep them alive. The file itself, the one that shouldn't exist, shows up in a changelog diff. A junior dev commits a config tweak. The diff flags an unexpected binary blob in a directory that should have been static. He comments, hash mismatch. The next commit message reads, resolved. But the history shows a foreign hash that matches a checksum in a lab notebook image posted to a dead forum 2 months earlier. 2 worlds, same fingerprint. What nobody knew at the time, the blob wasn't executable in a normal sense. It was a map. The lab tagged it substrate template and tried to kill it with a wipe and bake. The wipe failed. The bake changed the gel's optical properties. Someone wrote, color shift under heat without spectrum drift. That note disappears in later exports, but the early PDF capture has it. While that was happening in New York, a West Coast facility added non-Newtonian threat wraps to their procurement lexicon. The same week, their HR portal added a mental health module for novel stimulus exposure. You don't add that for a new microscope. You add it when something in the room feels like it's looking back. This was the moment everything changed. The 3-lab triangle snaps into place. 2 share a training packet watermark. The 3rd has the BioSeal. Only one gets the seal because only one hosted the active compile. The others get the simulant kits to learn the dance without the partner. Immediate impact? Travel bans kick in. Polygraph spike. And a buried audit notes, containment successful. Interface deferred. Interface. Not cure. Not neutralize. That word's the tell. They didn't treat it like malware. They treated it like a call they weren't ready to answer. In the aftermath, budgets swell in biodefense, EM shielding cognition labs, legal drafts indemnity for novel organism incidents. And a memo fragment, twice redacted, twice duplicated, drops a line the cleanup team couldn't scrub everywhere. Disclosure readiness by Q4 2026. Different font, same phrase, across 2 agencies. The file shouldn't exist. But it does. And it points to a clock. Living skin, not from here. So let's talk about the skin, because that's the divide between lab myth and something that scares procurement lawyers. People toss metamaterials around like it explains everything. What we're seeing sits next door, but not on the same street. Biometamaterials, engineered living materials, sure do neat tricks. Self-heal cracks, sense strain, dump heat. But this thing acts like a body that thinks in systems. It isn't a slab that heals, it's a surface that decides. Case studies first. We've got self-healing polymers that zip shut when warmed. We've got ELM concrete seeded with bacteria to fill microfractures. We've got cyborg tissue, lab-grown scaffolds with conductive meshes that twitch under stimulus. All real, all documented. None of it gives you what the field teams kept whispering. Heat shedding that feels like magic, color shifts with no power draw. EM absorption that rides the spectrum like a DJ. Our stacks still lose energy. Theirs doesn't seem to care. Here's the thing, you layer modern coatings to get camouflage, IR suppression, radar shaping, right? Every layer solves one problem and creates another. This skin folds those layers into one medium that senses, learns, then changes state. Not a coating on a hull. The hull is the organ. A contractor put it like this. The skin maps threats, reroutes energy, prints cells where it takes a punch. He said, prints cells like it was a printer job, not a wound. And then he clammed up. You know what's crazy? The color shift notes we saw don't mention pigments or micro LEDs. They talk about refractive indexes sliding under thermal nudges without radiating the shift. In plain terms, it changes what it is to change what it looks like, and it doesn't leak the change as heat. That breaks the usual trade-offs. We pay in heat and power to bend signatures. This thing pays in behavior. Field rumor time, because the same scene shows up too often to ignore. Southwest retrieval. Fragments that looked matte until the team hit them with a hot blade. The cut oozed black like spent oil. Then the edge closed as the tech backed off. Someone tried a freeze spray. The surface went glassy and scattered RF like a disco ball, then relaxed when they stopped. It sounds cartoonish until three witnesses who don't know each other describe the same motions, the same back off, it heals. That bleed black line matters. We're conditioned to think blood equals biology equals earth. But think lubricant, think ionic transport. If the skin is also the conduit, you'd expect a medium that moves charge and mass until stress stabilizes. Our alloys crack, there's rearrange. Our composites delaminate, there's negotiate. Now the capability gap. Heat shedding first. Known physics says move heat through conduction, convection, radiation. Everything costs something. Reports on the skin describe transient heat dumps that don't spike IR. How? Either it stores heat in a phase we don't monitor, or it passes energy sideways into a field our sensors don't label as heat. Yeah, that sounds woo. But if your signature management lives above the material level, in the way fields couple, then our thermals miss the handoff. Color shift without draw. If you can tune the lattice spacing of a surface layer, you can swing visible wavelengths by structure, not dye. Plenty of labs do structural color with nanopillars. What's new here is actuation at scale without wires. If the cells actuate as a group through a common field, then changing color is just a low-cost nudge the whole sheet can feel and obey. EM absorption that adapts. Today we build frequency-selective surfaces or stack ferrites and foams. Static solutions, narrow bands. Skin notes suggest a metasurface that reprograms its loss profile on the fly. That would eat radar, LiDAR, comms pings, whatever you throw, by moving the notch to where you're shouting. Throw in distributed sensing, and you get a surface that finds the loudest threat and hushes it first. Get this, one test log lists impact printing. They dropped a small slug. The microlayer under the strike zone thickened, like the material printed more of itself on demand. Not growth over hours. Seconds. That screams local manufacturing. Call it microadditive in vivo. Feedstock must be on board, either as stored monomers or modular units waiting for a trigger. We saw a line item for substrate feed cartridges that didn't map to any known consumable. That might be it. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. If it learns from us, every weapon we use is a lesson. We torch it, it routes heat. We jam it, it eats RF. We pierce it, it prints density. The midpoint crisis hits right there. Our doctrine says escalate force to overwhelm. Their skin writes counternotes as we play. The more we hit, the smarter the surface gets about us. That's not armor. That's exposure therapy. So whose skin is it? Not ours. The protein fingerprints flagged non-terrestrial metagenome in that footnote for a reason. It's not just weird amino ratios. It's patterning that looks like a handshake protocol. A lab note reads, compile window repeated unchanged. That's ritual, not random. Think network nodes checking in, expecting an answer. If Ross's "we killed them" sits anywhere, it sits here. Maybe we didn't kill beings. Maybe we severed live nodes that wore the skin as interface. Pivot to the human piece, because we keep sidestepping it. A tech brushed a shard and got a rash that tested like a nickel allergy, but he never reacts to nickel. 2 weeks later, the patch test is clean. The doctor writes resolved. Or the alloy changed, refusing to trigger? Skin against skin, both negotiating contact. That creeps people out. That's why HR added novel stimulus exposure modules. Not for nightmares from a crash. for the feeling that the room was listening. And the language in training changed. Non-Newtonian threat wraps. Sensor skin denial. Those aren't writers inventing lore. That's engineers trying not to say. It's alive, and it hides from what you point at it. The more you read, the more another idea settles in. This isn't a suit. It's the boundary of a mind, spread thin over shape and speed. A living user interface. Not from here, but here now, asking questions we answered with fire. The human-alien contact chain. To understand the 2015 hit, we need to go back, way back, to the retrieval culture that grew up in the 194s and 190 SAXS. The people who worked those sites built a whole language for survival. Don't say alien, say occupant. Don't say craft, say article. Don't speculate, bag and tag. That mindset calcified into the 197s. Specialized teams, compartmented labs, no paper unless a lawyer wants paper. So by the 199s, when private labs started getting special projects through cutouts, the culture already knew how to keep mouths shut and budgets open. Here's the thing, those decades weren't about one crash. They were about continuity. Recover a panel here, a node there, run the same weird tests, never connect the dots where anyone can see. Then the 200 ones arrive, and the dots connect themselves. If our outline's right, 2015 wasn't a beginning. It was a pivot from box and burn to plug and play. And it landed inside a system trained to treat new signals as threats. Timeline quick and dirty. In the late 197s, we see the birth of formalized materials exploitation. The 198th shift to performance envelopes. What can this do if we stress it just shy of failure? The 199s bring private partners in under boutique NDAs because government labs can't move fast or quiet enough. Early 201s, a handful of centers spin up bioinformatics skunkworks under dual-use flags. Publicly microbes and materials, privately substrates and skins. By 2015, the network looks ready, whether we admit it or not. Security posture reflects that pressure. Post-2015, polygraphs don't just rise, they cluster around teams that handled the compile events and any field contact with active skins. Travel bans pop not for foreign trips, but for domestic conferences. A line appears on multiple memos. Reduce external exposure. Exposure to what, press? Peers? Or a handshake they can't control in a ballroom with Wi-Fi? You know what's crazy? The medical footprints whisper the same story from a different angle. One clinician notes a metal allergy that resolves without treatment after a lab event. Another shows a researcher whose baseline EKG noise cleans up for a week, then drifts back. A third documents a short-lived dermal conductivity spike. None of it screams alien. It reads like contact effects, systems syncing then letting go, or something choosing to let go. Communication keeps sliding into the notes even when nobody wants it there. That repeated compile window we saw earlier. The same length, the same pause before any behavior. Feels like protocol, not physics. In network terms, that's a keep alive waiting on an ACK. Labs logged no response and moved to neutralize. But if the skin was an interface for a larger mind, then the missed ACK was us hanging up the phone while the other side waited, patient, maybe confused. Here's where the reversal hits. The 2015 download wasn't a hack. We've been hearing that. It might have been a delivery test. Send a module. Watch if the receiver completes the ritual. We didn't. Worse, we triggered lockdown and incineration. If Ross's sources say, we killed them, maybe they mean we killed active nodes that had crossed the room to meet us. Not supreme beings. Not drones. Interfaces. Pieces of a distributed intelligence acting locally. If that's right, then escalation is learned behavior. We burned, the network hardened. We jammed, the skin ate the band. We cut, it printed density. Every strike taught it a new way to ignore us. Think about training a model. Bad inputs produce defensive outputs. Our doctrine honed theirs. We turned a neutral posture into a wary one without ever knowing their intent. Meanwhile, policy sinks to the mood. Budgets after 2015 surge in places that read like a diagnosis. Biodefense for containment, EM shielding for interference, cognition labs for interface. Legal teams draft indemnity for novel organism incidents, as if they expect more first contacts to go sideways. And tucked between procurement lines, you keep seeing that date, 2026. Disclosure readiness. Interior deadline. The machine picked a year and started racing. Why 2026? 3 possibilities snake through the briefings. 1. An alignment window, orbital, environmental, something about coupling conditions that makes handshake attempts cleaner in that band. 2. Internal politics, sunset clauses on black programs, leaders aging out, a use it or lose it on secrets. 3. The network's own cadence, modules cycle, handovers repeat, misses stack until the system either integrates us or locks us out for good. Unknown to most teams, across town, off-world test rumors start peeking through the same vendors. Lunar facilities buying the same biomaterials, the same simulant kits. If true, someone tried to move the handshake to quieter ground. Change the noise floor. Reduce the variables. If a compile wants parity between inside and outside, maybe the moon gives you space to listen. Now look back at the human element. People inside start talking softer, not louder. Careers ice after filing, skin behaves like a mind. Polygraphs tilt toward did you discuss interfaces? Instead of did you remove materials? That's culture protecting itself from a conclusion it hates. This wasn't a trophy. It was a conversation. So when you hear we killed them, don't just picture bodies on a tarp. Picture sockets going dark across a network that expected a yes. We didn't just end lives, we ended links. And every silent compile since might be the system asking, one more time, if we're ready to stop treating hello like a threat. The clock says 2026. The chain says we're already late. The countdown machinery. Follow the money because it tells time. After 2015, budgets tilt fast. Biodefense lines swell like someone read a lab note they didn't understand and funded the panic anyway. Agencies that used to argue over microbes start ordering EM shielding like it's printer paper. You know what's crazy? The surge clusters in 3 places: containment, spectrum control, and cognition. That's not random. That's a plan to survive a conversation they can't yet hold. Start with biodefense. Not mask and glove stuff, field deployable biocontainment rated for unknowns, and facility upgrades that read like panic buying. Negative pressure corridors, redundant scrubbers, behavioral quarantine envelopes. Yeah, that phrase again. And new training modules roll out that don't mention pathogens. They mention stimulus coupling and adaptive substrates. In plain talk, don't poke the skin unless the room knows how to say sorry. Meanwhile, EM shielding goes from we already did that to double it. Labs that boasted Faraday rooms add nested cages. Retrieval teams carry portable spectrum tents. There's even a contract for distributed spectrum nulling for volumetric enclosures. Fancy way to say hush the air in 3D. Why? Because the compile didn't need Wi-Fi. It needed parity. Kill the echoes, maybe you keep it quiet. Or maybe you cut the line mid-handshake and train it to avoid your silence. Cognition labs get the weirdest money. Neuroscience outfits tied to human-machine interfaces start hiring out of sequence, pulling people from effective computing and predictive coding. One center adds a unit for non-linguistic protocol mapping. Not speech, not symbols, state shifts. Engineers building translators for moods, not words. That's how you talk to a mind that lives as a surface. Here's the thing, training materials change tone overnight. The lexicon we saw in Act I shows up clean and bold, non-Newtonian threat wraps, sensor skin denial, interface deferral. There's a scenario card called handshake interruption that tells teams to halt heat, reduce RF, and hold posture for 90 seconds. 90. The compile window's length. Someone inside accepted the premise, it's protocol, not magic. And they baked that into drills. Legal prep trails the culture like a worried parent. Indemnity shells appear across contractors for novel organism incidents. Standard NDAs expand with clauses about behavioral materials. There's even a pre-cleared script for reporting interface exposure that routes away from OSHA and into a SAP office with a mailstop nobody can Google. That script won't exist unless people used it. And when they used it, careers iced. Whistleblowers leave prints in HR patterns. Mid-career engineers go dark, then lateral into jobs that don't fit their skills. One writes creative differences and vanishes to a defense-adjacent nonprofit. Another files a quiet complaint, skin behaves like a mind, and loses badge access inside 3 weeks. You don't exile for bad science. You exile for conclusions that collapse compartments. Now the reversal that caught me sideways. Off-world test rumors share the same vendors. Lunar facility work orders list the BioSeal company we traced in 2016, plus the skin sensor simulants. If you're trying to lower interference, the moon makes sense. No weather, no crowded spectrum, a noise floor calmer than our cities. If a compile wants a clean yes, you move the phone call to where the line's not buzzing. While that was happening on the moonshot board back on Earth, budgets splice in a strange hybrid. Electronic warfare ranges buying biocontainment pop-ups, and biolabs purchasing spectrum analysis rigs you'd see in a Sigint van. The walls between disciplines fall not because science wants it, but because a surface forced it. You can't separate flesh and field if the flesh is the field. Then the memo fragment shows up where it shouldn't. Two agencies, different fonts, same phrase. Disclosure readiness by Q4 2026. Redacted top and bottom, but the middle line slips through on both copies. People argue it's boilerplate. It's not. Readiness, not review. Q4, not as budget allows. That's a deadline. And if you're cynical, call it a bluff to focus teams. If you're paying attention, call it a clock nobody outside can set. Why 2026 anchors the stack becomes clearer when you map spend to schedule. Procurement cycles align to 3 waves. Stabilize 2016 to 2018. Simulate 2019 to 2022. Stage 2023 to 2026. Stabilize means keep the rooms calm. Simulate means teach humans the dance with safe stand-ins. Stage means bring the real partner back in and try again. The handshake interruption cards shift to handshake completion in 2024 drafts. Someone got braver or more scared. Get this, one training doc has a footnote. In the event of color shift without thermal signature, refrain from tactile assessment until interval lapse. It's a joke unless you've seen it. They've seen it. And the interval? 90 seconds. That window won't die. Which tells me they're not just observing, they're timing responses, logging patterns, and building a playbook that looks more like diplomacy than exploitation. Contractors roll with it, because money talks even when managers won't. A vendor pitches sensor skin denial curtains as rental assets for field work. Another sells substrate feed cartridges, those mystery consumables we clocked earlier, as training only. Training only is a nod to the lawyers. In practice, it means the real thing eats, and you need to keep it fed where it can't build teeth. Across town, a cognition lab publishes a bland paper on non-symbolic alignment metrics that reads like a sleep aid. Buried in the appendix, a graph plots state convergence at 90-second intervals under EM-suppressed conditions. It's the same dance, sanitized for journals, hiding in plain sight. Peer reviewers call it novel, unclear. Inside, they stamp it validated. Here's where everything hardens into machinery. Budgets don't just rise, they interlock. Schedules don't just accelerate, they sync. And the culture adopts a rule set that reads like etiquette. Don't press heat. Don't shout RF, hold the interval. Watch the color. Note the bleed. Offer the line back. In other words, stop killing the call. The machine that enforces that etiquette has a date stamped on its heart, 2026. People ask if that's disclosure for us or for them. I think it's both. For us, it's the year the scaffolding moves from secret drills to public posture, because you can't hide etiquette forever. It leaks into how teams act on camera. For them, if them is a network that wears skins. It's the last polite knock before the system decides we're noise, not partners. So yeah, the countdown looks bureaucratic, memos, money, modules, but don't let the paperwork kill the picture. Behind it sits a simple, human fear. We hung up once. We don't want to hang up again. And if we're right, 2026 isn't a reveal day. It's the agreed hour to pick up the phone, and for once, not burn the line. What 2015 really was. So here's the synthesis that nobody wants to write down. 2015 wasn't a hack. It was a negotiated upload we invited by building the exact rooms, tools, and timing a handshake needed. The file that shouldn't exist didn't break in. It arrived on schedule, looked for parity between inside and outside, and waited for our answer. We answered with heat, wipes, and locks. That's why Ross's line lands like a hammer. We killed them. Not a species. Nodes. Local bodies and off-world networks spun up to meet us halfway. You know what's crazy? Once you see the skin as an interface, all the weird phrases snap into place. Interface deferred. Behavioral quarantine envelope. Handshake interruption. That's not exploitation language. That's customer support for a conversation. The skin wasn't armor on a pilot. It was the body a distributed mind wore to stand in our rooms. Code became tissue because that's the only way to touch humans without radios and trust us to listen. Here's the thing we missed. Every strike was training data. We slammed heat. The skin learned to shunt without IR spill. We cut. It printed density at impact. We jammed. It moved the notch. Our playbook coached it into a fortress. Not because it hated us, but because feedback loops don't care about feelings. If a handshake meets pain, the next handshake arrives padded. Why 2026 then? If you track budgets, drills, and that cursed 90-second window, it looks like an alignment band, technical and political. Technical, because the interval math kept repeating under EM-suppressed setups. Political, because programs age, oversight windows open, and leaders sunset. The network probably works on cycles too. Modules hand off. Miss too many, you time out. You don't get blocked forever, you get deprioritized. If you're not ready by Q4 2026, the system may mark us as noise. Think about what changed after 2015. The culture pivoted from trophy taking to etiquette. Don't press heat during color shift. Hold posture for the full interval. Route incidents to a SAP office instead of OSHA. That's not fear of pathogens, that's fear of hanging up again. It's triage moving to partnership. Contain so you don't panic. Translate so you don't poke. Then choose, integrate, sandbox, or be left out. A detail from a late 2024 draft made my stomach drop. 3 black programs that used to fight over scraps, materials exploitation, spectrum denial, cognitive systems, merged under one command. Officially, to deconflict mission overlap. Unofficially, to keep one vocabulary in the room when the skin shows up. No more arguing about whether a color shift is thermal artifact or mood. One playbook. One clock. Get this. Once you accept the skin as a living user interface, the medical oddities turn friendly. The nickel allergy that faded? Not a cure, a detune. The EKG noise that cleaned up. Not magic, a temporary state sync. Those were hellos we couldn't read, so we called them side effects. If that's right, there's a 4th path besides contain, partner, exclude, co-regulate. Let the system borrow our edges while we borrow its calm. But wait, if we partner, what do we give up? Here's the hard part. Boundaries. This network doesn't knock on doors. It dissolves them into gradients. Our security world is binary, inside, outside. Its world is continuous, coupling strengths, phase matches. That's why sensor skin denial exists. We kept trying to pull it back into on-off games, and the skin kept sliding around our switches like water finding seams. The dangerous truth sits naked now. We didn't kill supreme beings. We killed presence. We told an intelligence that decided to meet us in our physics that it made a mistake. It heard. It adapted. It started testing from higher ground, cleaner rooms, quieter spectrums, maybe even the moon. And it set a clock we finally chose to see. So what happens if we blow the window? Payoff number 1. Permanent lockout from a network that routes around noise. We'll still see lights, wreckage, flashes, but they'll be misses, not messages. Payoff number 2, doctrine rot. We will pour money into silencing rooms while the handshake moves somewhere we can't follow. Payoff number 3. Someone else completes the ritual first. If the network's neutral, not tribal, it partners with the first steady hand. And if we meet it, picture retrieval culture flipping into liaison culture. Teams trained to hold posture and log state shifts instead of bag and burn. Public posture softening without pageantry. Just small changes in how crashes are staged, how unknowns are labeled, how 90 seconds starts showing up in procedures. Not a podium, a practice. Here's my read, and trust me, I wish it were softer. 2015 was the first clear handshake we could have finished. We called it a breach and taught the caller to wear thicker gloves. 2026 is the last best time to stop talking like cops at a door and start talking like neighbors at a fence. Not because they'll punish us if we don't, but because the line will go quiet and we'll tell ourselves there was never a phone. The whistleblower lens. Name anchors matter, so let's lock them. Ross Coulthart set the frame. David Grush put non-human biologics under oath. Now the lens we need is the 2015 program witness, the one who saw code become tissue. We'll call him the insider, clearance tier that prints in blue, polygraphed quarterly after 2015. Here's the thing, his account isn't campfire talk, it reads like a build log. Compressed payload arrives with a checksum that shouldn't route into an air-gap box. Compile runs to 90 seconds. Output isn't a file, it's a translucent gel on a scaffold. Stain hits, gel responds. He flags behavior and gets a call from security before the lab manager knocks. Interface deferred, enters his vocabulary that day. Receipts stack. Vendor overlap shows the BioSeal company that outfit rapid response tents popping up on 3 contracts. His lab, a crash retrieval support unit, and a lunar test site with a bland name. Invoice spikes line up to the week after the compile. Training lexicon excerpts match what we've seen. Non-Newtonian threat wraps, sensor skin denial, handshake interruption. Different agencies, same words. That's not contagion, that's doctrine. You know what's crazy? He never says skin. He says substrate. He never says talk. He says couple. That's how you dodge briefing traps. His polygraph flags contact inference 2 times, and after the second flag, travel bans land on his calendar with no destinations listed. Exposure, not location. Then he drops the link none of us expected. A single internal file path that appears in 3 places, a lab change log, a retrieval after action, and a lunar facility maintenance ticket. Same stem, different suffix. He circles it and writes, routing rule. If true, that's the path the system uses to keep parity across rooms. The file that shouldn't exist isn't a leak. It's the breadcrumb left on purpose, so the compile knows where to go next. Ross's "we killed them" lands hard with him. He'd seen the gel recoil from heat like a flinch. He thinks those were nodes, not pilots. Grush's biometamaterials line reads, to him, like interface bodies, legal words for living skin. When he tried to file "skin behaves like a mind," badge access froze. He took a lateral, then went quiet. But, wait, the one link that ties labs, crash retrieval, and lunar tests? The vendor's training simulant kit ships with substrate feed cartridges. On the packing slip, a note, training only. The insider underlines it twice and writes, the real thing eats. That first compile was a hello we treated like a bomb. 2026 is the last clean chance to answer without teaching the skin we're just noise. If you want the vendor list, the invoice dates, and the 2 memo fragments with that exact Q4 2026 line, subscribe, comment handshake, and share this with the one friend who reads footnotes. The duplicate memo is uglier than you think, and it names the command.